show.
Welcome to episode 31 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. He's Lepore, I'm Bruno. Thank you so much for listening and watching us on YouTube as well. If you're a new listener and you enjoy the show, it would be a big time help if you give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple. And if you're watching us on YouTube, we would really appreciate it if you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you know exactly when the GFP podcast is posting some new content. All right. We are a little over a month away from the start of training camp for the 2021-2022 NHL season. Free agency has come and gone. A lot of the rosters across the league are set in stone at this point. We're still waiting for a couple shoes to drop. Maybe Jack Eichel's going to get traded, and that'll change things up in the NHL. But things are, what you see right now with a lot of these rosters is what you're probably going to see on opening night. And in this episode, we're going to go over some Stanley Cup futures.
Let's go.
So we're going to talk about some teams that we're going to probably put some money on heading into the season. And there's going to be some other chatter as well. We're going to talk Leafs. We're going to talk Edmonton Oilers. We're going to get into a bunch of stuff, and I promise you don't want to miss it. But before we get into all that, it is time to welcome in my partner in crime, Mr. Michael Lepore. How are you doing, man?
Anthony Bruno, I'm doing well. Went to Little Italy last night. Took my wife for a nice dinner. It's nice to get out and do things. We're getting a little bit of normalcy back in our lives, which is great. Everyone go out there, have fun, but be safe. Episode 31. Shout out to Leafs goalie legend Curtis Joseph, who was the goalie in the Leafs during those Matt Sundin years. I guess Balfour flavored in there as well. But we saw some great times with Curtis Joseph. And like I said, he rocked the number 31. Here's a question about Curtis Joseph. Well, I have two questions about Curtis Joseph. A, should Curtis Joseph be in the Hall of Fame? And B, if he is in the Hall of Fame, should he be labeled as a Toronto Maple Leaf?
Ooh, that's tough. First of all, I love the shout out because Cujo's the man.
The man.
Should he be a Hall of Famer? I'm going to say yes.
I looked it up. Was he 7th all time in wins? He's 7th all time in wins. That's a big stat.
The only problem, he does not have a cup, correct?
Yeah, they got even. Yeah, like.
I mean, he tried to chase one with Detroit.
Yeah, and then they got swept by the Ducks. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna say. I mean, when you look at his body of work and the numbers and all that and the wins, I'm gonna say yes.
Yeah, I think he gets in eventually. Yeah, I think he gets in eventually, and the whole like played for the Leafs thing exists, so he'll get kicked in.
And do you think he goes in as a Leaf if he gets in?
I'll flip it around. Like, who would you more remember him as? Because he did have playoff success with the Leafs. I mean, his coming out party was with the Blues. And I actually remember him standing on his head against the Leafs, like back in the day, playing for the Blues. And then obviously with the Oilers, I mean, there was some success with the Oilers, but I don't know, like call me a Leaf homer or whatever. But I do think I picture him like his prime, like biggest years, like with the Leafs, like Team Canada 2-0-2. He was a Leaf at that time. Like, I don't think he got any other Canada nods. I might be wrong about that one, but let's call it a Leaf. Joseph's a Hall of Famer, and he's a Toronto Maple Leaf. There you go.
I love it. I agree, Lepore. I think if he does get into the Hall, he is going to go in as a Leaf.
Yeah.
All right, man. Yeah, so once again, shout out to Cujo. I mean, especially us in the era that we watched the Leafs and fell in love with the Leafs. He was like one of the main guys. So you got to love Curtis Joseph. But Lepore, let's get right into this and look at some of these Stanley Cup betting odds for the upcoming season.
This is going to be fun, Bruno. Let's talk about our problems as degenerate gamblers.
This is awesome, man. So these odds are courtesy of Bodog. And Bodog, whenever you're
sponsor,
whenever you want to do it, we're ready. We're ready for that sponsorship.
Brought to you by Bodog. Doesn't that sound great?
Oh, that would sound awesome.
I mean, incredible.
But yeah, I mean, let's get into these betting odds, Lepore here. So the favorite to win the Stanley Cup this season, Colorado Avalanche at 5-1. Right behind them, the two-time defending Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning, 5.5-1. Then you have the Vegas Golden Knights at 7-1, and the Carolina Hurricanes and Toronto Maple Leafs both 12-1. So those are your top 5 teams in terms of the betting odds to win the Stanley Cup next season. And let's start things here, Lepore, with, of course, our beloved Toronto Maple Leafs. They are 12-1 to win the Stanley Cup this season. Heading into last season, it was right in that same range. I actually put a bet on the Leafs last season. I believe I got them at 13 or 14-1, which I
How'd
thought
that go?
was pretty good. And I thought it was great value at the time. And I was pretty excited when they basically had their best regular season in franchise history, just in terms of, they finished the season last year at like 110-point pace. So I felt good about it going into the playoffs, but obviously that was a colossal disaster.
And the division, the runway to the semifinal, as we all thought.
It looked like it just could not go wrong. But yeah, I mean, this year they're fishing us in again, 12-1. The core four still intact. Matthews, Marner, Tavares, and Nylander, they're running it back. So Lepore, I ask you this. Would you bet on the Leafs right now at 12-1 to win the Stanley Cup in 2022?
To further drive home the point of last year and betting on the Leafs, I'm pretty sure going into the playoffs, Money Puck had the Leafs as the favorite to win the Stanley Cup, like on that pie thing. And mainly because of the division. They saw who they were going to play, and they gave very, very little chance to Montreal to beat them and the Oilers or the Jets to beat them. So I guess they just saw them in the semifinals and they thought, hey, this team, because they're going to get there, should have great odds. As far as betting on the Toronto Maple Leafs to win the 21-22 Stanley Cup, 12-1. I actually do think 12-1 is a nice number. Like I really and truly do. And people are flipping out right now at me saying, like, even putting a dime on the Toronto Maple Leafs to win the Stanley Cup. But there has to be that thing of, like, logic versus emotion. I think the reactions I would get to that comment are typical of how Leafs fans feel right now after this team just disappointed us so much, and there's a lot of doom and gloom, and there's talks that guys have to be traded, and people are wondering about the mood within the organization. And for the first time, real and true pressure on Kyle Dubas and his job. But at the same time, like, it's still a great lineup. It's still a lineup with a lot of star power. And being completely objective, I do look at that number 12-1 and, like, yeah, it's reasonable or not. I'm not saying, oh my God, it's a slam dunk, throw your house at it. But I think it's a good bet, like 12 times the money to bet on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, most models I see have them like top 5 in the league. So heck, 12-1, why not? But why I really do like it is because I don't think they're done. Like, I don't think they're done trying to get better. And if the season does go well, as I mentioned before, the pressure on Dubas, and let's face it, like, the pressure on the organization as a whole, they will do their best to get better throughout the season and towards the deadline. So you may not that I think the Leafs will pop to like a 5-1 or a 6-1 at one point, but I think at 12-1, it's a nice bet. And if this team makes some slight improvements and adds at the deadline, you might see this team creep up to like maybe a 10-1, like a 9-1, maybe if they make something really happen. But at 12-1, I would take it. What do you think, Bruno?
Yeah, no, I totally see where you're coming from. And you mentioned that if they do improve and get better, you're going to see that number drop a little bit. The same thing happened last year. Like, when I got them at whatever it was, 13-14-1, about 25 games into the season, they were down to 7-1.
7-1?
Yeah, they were down to like 7-8-1 last year.
Now you're making me feel even worse. 7-1 to win the cup.
Because they were on track to obviously win the North Division, and it got to a point, and then they obviously, when they officially locked up the North Division and they had the number 1 seed, yeah, I think they honestly went into the playoffs at like 7-1 to win the cup. So yeah, I mean, who knows what's going to happen this season and how that number is going to change, and if they're going to make any moves before the season starts. But here's what I look at, Lepore. Yes, I do think it is a good number, and I'm probably going to get fished into this again, and I'm probably going to light my money on fire and put a bet on the Leafs at 12-1. Here's my only concern. And I went back and I looked at all these other teams over the last, let's call it decade that had these star players in place as their core, right? So you go back to Pittsburgh and you look at Crosby and Malkin. And what I want to look at here, Lepore, is how many playoff series these teams won before they actually won the Stanley Cup. And as we all know,
Pittsburgh lost in the final the year before, right?
And as we all know, Lepore, this core has not won a playoff series. The Leafs have not won a single playoff series in 17 years since 2004. So that's the one little hesitation I have, is that I would have liked them to obviously win a playoff series this past season, but it's like, can this team actually win the cup without winning a playoffs, like without this core first winning a playoff series before going into that Stanley Cup season? Yeah. Like when you look at
0 to 100.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Like, I don't know. I don't really see it happening, but like, let's just talk about this for a second. So you got the Penguins. They won 3 playoff series before they won a cup with Crosby and Malkin. And like you said, that Penguins team got to the cup final the year before they won the Stanley Cup.
Was that I'm trying to get my years right. So 07, they played Ottawa in the first round. The year Ottawa made it. So they lost first rounds. They hadn't won because they were bad, dude. They finished the bottom, or bad. I mean, they were a lower finishing team in the conference. And then I guess, made the final and then won. So yeah.
And then won the cup. And then looking at Ovechkin and Nicholas Backstrom. Okay. So those guys, I mean, it obviously took Washington a little bit longer to win a Stanley Cup, but that team had won 6 playoff series before going into their season and on their cup run. So again, these playoff series victories I'm talking about are not including like the year that they actually won the Stanley Cup.
They won 6, but the big thing with them is they never even made the conference finals, correct? So it was correct. Like 6, was it 6 years in a row? Or it must have been like 6 years in a row. They lost in the second round, or like 6 out of 7 years. They had a lot of second round
exits in there. So they'd win either, they'd win one round, lose in the second round. But yeah, they never, from just racking my brain right now, I don't think they ever made it to the conference final.
No, they definitely didn't. Yeah, I mean, that was the big thing. They can't get past the second round.
And then the Blackhawks, Lepore, the Kane and Taves era, they won 2 playoff series before they won the Stanley Cup for the first time in 2009, 2010. And that was Kane and Taves' 3rd year in the league. Just going back to Crosby, they won the cup in Crosby's 4th year in the league, Pittsburgh. Washington did it in Ovechkin's 13th year. Like I said, it was a little bit different. He won when he was in his 30s. And then the last team I want to look at here, Lepore, is Tampa. So obviously, they started kind of with the Stamkos and Hedman era, and then Kucherov and Point have kind of come in. I don't want to say recently, but it was after Stamkos and Hedman had kind of established themselves as like the 2 main guys there.
Yeah.
But Tampa, before winning the cup in 2020, that team with that core had won 7 playoff series.
Yeah, they won a lot
before winning the Stanley Cup.
They lost in the final and then lost in a conference final as well, right? With like Boucher.
Exactly. So just looking at that, those are the concerns that I have for this Leafs team. It's like you said, can they actually go from 0 to 100? Like that has me a little bit concerned. Like you want to see that natural progression, right? You want to see them win a playoff series, maybe get to the second round of the conference finals. But who knows? Maybe this is the team, Lepore, that shocks the world. And after all these first round exits, losing in Game 7 of Boston, losing in Game 5 to Columbus, losing in Game 7, obviously, to the Montreal Canadiens this past season, maybe they just say, fuck it, and they go 0 to 100 and win the cup.
What's interesting is even we mentioned Tampa, like 5.5 to 1, and it's a hypothetical, but I mean, even then, like Vegas is giving them a lot of credit. Like, what would Toronto's odds be had the assumption, like if the assumption wasn't there that they have to go through Tampa? I mean, they'd kick up a couple notches for sure. I mean, just knowing the second ranked team is ahead of them and they'd be on a collision course with that team. So Vegas is giving them credit, man. But no, I'm with you. Like, you kind of like to see that gradual progression. It's sports, and hopefully something very, very weird happens to the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah. And you know what? Like when you look at this team on paper, I know a lot of people are upset and they're saying they didn't do anything this offseason. They picked up all these cheap contracts. We talked about this on the last show. The core is in place. There is a lot of teams around the National Hockey League that do not have 4 star caliber players in their top 6 that are all capable of scoring 30 goals, that are all capable of putting up a point a game, that are all capable of driving your team offensively. Like, this is a team that's now finished, as a top 5 offense pretty much every season of the Matthews era. Yeah. Like this team has been able to put points on, to put goals on the board, I should say. And obviously their struggles have come in the playoffs. And we saw it against Columbus. They scored 10 goals in 5 games in the qualifying round. We saw the offense dry up against the Montreal Canadiens. Matthews and Marner, just 1 goal. But this team, as currently constructed right now, with the core 4, with Morgan Rielly, with Jack Campbell and Peter Mrazek in net, with that D-core essentially returning from last year, minus Bogosian, and now you're bringing in Rasmus Sandin to play those minutes. There's no reason this team can't do what they did last year, Lepore. Like, I'm not going to say they're going to go out there and win the Atlantic Division, but there's no reason that this team can't play again at whatever it was, a 108-point pace.
Yeah.
And be in the mix to be one of those, let's call it top 7 or 8 teams in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, like I think people have this thing in their head right now because there's so much negativity and because we were left so disappointed with the playoff result that like the Leafs are going to be bad. Like there's this feeling that there's like this mood within the team and the team's going to be bad. And like, it sucks to have to kind of like remind yourself of it because it makes you feel worse about the season. But this team has the Maurice Rocket Richard winner, a first-team All-Star in Mitch Marner, and a second-team All-Star in Matthews, and he's only a second-team All-Star because Connor McDavid exists. Like, that's a lot. You know what I mean? A lot of teams would do a lot to have that. And I can already hear people throwing shit at us, like being homers and being positive, but there's just a lot of negativity around the Leafs right now. So it's a new season. Try our best to forget what happened and come in with a clean slate. And like, to your point too, about like Sandin coming in, that's a huge X factor to me, because I think like those of us who have watched Sandin progress, watch his time with the Marlies and like the little dabbles he's had in the NHL, he's got a high ceiling. So like this team improved a lot defensively last year, a lot defensively. And if Sandin can be something, that's an improvement. Like both the forwards improved defensively, and like we finally had a group of 4 that knew what the heck they were doing in their own end. So Sandin moves up. We have like a stable 5 guys. We'll see what happens with Liljegren. There was some excitement with Sandin with regard to his power play performances and like what he provided there. So it could be like a nice positive for the Toronto Maple Leafs, as weird as that sounds during this offseason, like trying to give people optimism going into 21-22.
No, it's true. The Sandin X factor, I think, is huge because, people forget last season, he missed the whole season with an injury. I believe he had a fractured foot or a fractured
I think he broke his foot,
leg or something like that. But anyway, he missed essentially the entire season, and the Leafs had that much confidence in him that, coming back from his rehab, they said, all right, giddy up, man. You're in the lineup for the playoffs. And he ended up playing 5 playoff games against the Montreal Canadiens. So now Sandin has another offseason to get fully healthy, to get stronger. And you add, his 15 minutes on that third pair with Travis Dermott, man, that's huge. With a guy that obviously has the ability to play 20 minutes a night in the NHL. I mean, I have, some people might call me crazy, but I truly believe that Rasmus Sandin, like this year coming up, can easily play 20 minutes a game in the NHL. And I know the Leafs' top 4 defense is set, with Rielly and TJ Brody and then Muzzin and Hall. But if there's an injury there, there's no reason that Sandin can't step up and play big minutes for this Leafs team. So yeah, that's a huge, huge X factor, Lepore. But yeah, looking at this team, 12-1 to win the Stanley Cup, it is a pretty solid bet. And like you said, I think we're both going to get fished into this, and we're both going to put some money on the Leafs heading into the season. But Lepore, is there another bet out here that sticks out to you? First, I'll ask you in a good way. Like, is there another number out here with one of these other teams that you just cannot wait to bet?
One that hit me immediately is the Knights. The Knights at 7-1. Number one, because they're psychotic over there and they'll do whatever it takes to get better. And number two, I'd be taking a bet on them getting Jack Eichel and getting a heck of a lot better. And you look at that kind of like similar to the Leafs last year. Like that's a trash division. Like you think Vegas now seems like the slam dunk to win that division. If they add,
Vegas is like should be a lock to win.
They should be able to walk to the top of that division. Then if you add Jack Eichel, man, like so like it's almost hard at this point to not see the Vegas Knights in we're allowed to say the conference finals again. I almost said semifinals. It's not unfair to us to right now to pencil Vegas into the semifinal. So that one jumped out to me. Two others, like, and it's that whole thing with like, you look at these odds, like the team has to win the cup to win, but making the point about like, okay, getting good value. Two that really jumped out at me. One is the Islanders at 22-1. I mean, this is a team that's been to the conference final the last 2 years. Last year, they did it without Anders Lee. And there's the rumblings that they may, not that it would be a huge X factor addition, but there's the rumblings that they may sign Zach Parise. And again, like you have Lou, probably going to try to make the team get better. Be my guest, bet against Barry Trotz. And that division altogether, to me, like a lot of people are having that division taking a bit of a dive. So why not? Like they've proven to us in the past that they can go deep. And they have an organization right now that's trying to win. So at 22-1, that one intrigues me. The other one, and people know how much of a homer of this team I am, is the Wild at 25-1. That team did something pretty drastic with those two buyouts of Parise and Suter. I think they're going to like go for it. Like there's a couple of years from now where like those buyouts are really going to hurt them. So I have that thing in my brain that like, well, in the meantime, they might as well go bananas and go for it. And then kind of rebuild later. Like they'll have their rebuild delayed because of those moves, which is kind of weird and different. And we haven't really seen a team in the NHL do that from what I can remember. But at 25-1, they were a nice team last year. They cut some fat. Bill Guerin's a smart guy. So 25 times your money, man. I think that's pretty good value on the Minnesota Wild. This is a team last year that pushed Vegas to 7. And again, like right now, it's tough to envision like the Minnesota Wild winning the Stanley Cup. But it's about value, and I think that's pretty good value, man.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you with the Wild. And, you know, we were both high on the Wild last year, and we thought, I mean, you picked them to beat Vegas in the playoffs. I had that series going 7, and I had Vegas winning. But, man, that was a team that if they had gotten past Vegas, they could have taken down Colorado. I mean, going back to last season, I did think Colorado was the best team in the league, but that Minnesota team, they were probably the most underrated team in the league. And I think when people started looking at the analytics and they saw what some of the analytics guys on Twitter were talking about, I think a lot of people started getting on the bandwagon of Minnesota and realizing that they were a lot better than met the eye. I mean, you have like Kirill Kaprizov, who came over from the KHL and was unreal last season. You got guys like Kevin Fiala. That blue line is really solid. Like that's a good team, man. I'm right there with you at 25-1 on the Minnesota Wild. Another team, Lepore, at 25-1 that really sticks out to me is the Dallas Stars. Nice. I think that's a very good team. And what people forget last season, they dealt with COVID. You know, everyone likes to talk about the Habs and how they jammed all these games into like 50 days and they were the only team that did it. There were multiple teams that dealt with that. And the Dallas Stars were one of those teams because I believe their COVID outbreak happened like right at the start of the season.
Yeah.
And the first like 2 or 3 weeks, they barely played. I think they played like 5 or 6 games. Like it was crazy over the first like 3 weeks of the season. And that was a team that was missing Tyler Seguin last season. He finally came back. Didn't he? I think he came back at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Didn't he have the same injury that you had, Lepore?
He did. I don't know exactly what procedure he had, but it was a similar hip procedure. So yeah, we're equivalent level athletes.
Exactly. Lepore and Tyler Seguin.
He blew his playing in the NHL. I blew mine playing co-ed indoor soccer. Same thing, right?
Love it, man. Love it, Lepore. You're a freak of nature, man.
Yeah.
What an athlete, Michael Lepore. But no, I mean, the Dallas Stars, they get a full season of Tyler Seguin. Joe Pavelski had a great season last year, a little resurgence for him. And then you look at the rookie, Jason Robertson, who had a nice rookie season. Rupe Hintz, who was essentially a point a game player last year, even though he dealt with some injuries. So you go through their forward core, and I haven't even mentioned guys like Jamie Benn, who now has kind of taken a back seat on that team after being, their leading scorer for a number of years. Alex Radulov. They added Ryan Suter on the blue line to go with,
underrated signing, man. Underrated signing.
Exactly. To go with Miro Heiskanen, who's widely considered one of the best young D-men in the league. Essa Lindell, John Klingberg. And in net, they're still solid with Hudobin and Jake Ottinger. So that's a team that I look at 25-1. And they are in a tough division. You got Colorado, obviously, in that central division, who should run away with it, quite frankly. I mean, St. Louis is solid. And then obviously Minnesota, who we just talked about. So it's probably going to be tough. It's going to be tough for Dallas to, you could argue, to even make the playoffs. But quite frankly, I think that the Stars will make the playoffs. I'm not going to say they're a lock. But yeah, when I look at that team at 25-1, fully healthy, I think that's a pretty solid bet as well to win the Stanley Cup.
No, I think that's an awesome one, Bruno. Like, you impressed me with that one. You may have caused some action to my bank account to fire a transfer to Bodog after talking about the Dallas Stars.
Love it.
Two more that jumped out at me really quick are at this 25-1 number are Pittsburgh and Washington. Like, again, I think if no one's really talking about them, they'd have the greatest playoffs. Like, it's kind of simmered down, and like the whole like Ovechkin Crosby thing. But again, 25 times your money, and these are teams that are going to try to win. They're going to try to get better. So I like those ones too, man.
Yeah.
I think it kind of shows our like gambling problems that there's so many of these bets that
we're just going to light so much money on fire before the season starts. No, but honestly, man, like those should almost be insta bets on Pittsburgh and Washington, as crazy as that sounds, right? It's like, again, you talk about like cores still being in place. Like, do you want to bet against Crosby and Malkin? Like and listen, I know recently Crosby has not had a lot of playoff success. I tweeted about this, going back to earlier in the summer, where he has like a brutal record. His last, 3 playoff series or something, like it's sad. Like, they've been swept twice.
Yeah.
And then they lost in like 5 or 6 games the other time. So, but again, that's a team I do not want to bet against. And same thing with Washington, right? Like, all they got to do is tinker a few things. Maybe they make a trade. And next thing you know, those teams are going on a run again. So yeah, I love them at 25-1 as well.
And again, the Metro is kind of like a weird division. Like, if you really look at the rundown of the Metro, is there anyone that would not too many teams that would shock you? Like if they came out?
No, not at all.
So,
especially considering and I guess we can segue into which bets look bad. And one thing that sticks out to me, Lepore, is the Carolina Hurricanes at 12-1. Speaking about that Metropolitan Division, they lost Dougie Hamilton in free agency to the Devils, and the Devils also in the Metro, but I don't think they're quite ready to make a run yet. And the New York Islanders, despite everything you said about them, and I completely agree with you, you could even argue that team has slightly taken a step back. But again, that's a team. Last year, Lepore, going into the playoffs, no one had the Islanders getting out of that East Division, right? With Boston and obviously with Pittsburgh, especially Pittsburgh winning. I believe Pittsburgh won that division last season.
They did.
And they were the favorites to go to the semifinals. But yeah, that's a Metro division, man, that when you look at it, it's like, honestly, I can see a number of these teams emerging and getting to the conference finals. And yeah, like going back to Carolina, they lost Dougie Hamilton. They have completely new goaltending. So I don't think they're as strong as they were last season. And then the New York Rangers, they have Chris Drury, who they just brought in as general manager, and they're kind of tinkering with things. They lost Pavel Buchnevich, and they signed Barclay Goodrow to that terrible 6-year contract. So
yeah,
that's a team where you're not quite, they have a lot of talent, but can they figure it out? So yeah, man, like I'm looking at Pittsburgh and Washington for sure. But yeah, one team that sticks out to me as being a kind of a shitty bet right now is the Hurricanes at 12-1.
Yeah, the Carolina one jumped out to me too. What do you think? They come one after another. What do you think about the Bruins and Panthers? Bruins at 15-1, Panthers at 18-1.
If I were to bet on one of those, I'd probably bet on the Panthers.
Yeah.
And again, like that's a team where it's kind of similar to the Leafs, where they just have not been able to have that progression. Like that's a team that
Yeah.
you think would probably be a little bit further ahead than they are right now, just based on having like Barkov and Huberdeau as their core. And they just brought in
Mhm.
Sam Reinhart and they picked up Sam Bennett last season. Like it's a really nice offensive team. But yeah, I would still bet on them just because the Bruins, man, like I'm almost over the Bruins at this point. Like I know Marchand is still a really good player. Same with Bergeron. Those guys are, approaching their like mid 30s at this point, but they lost
Weird,
David
eh?
Krejci to the Czech Republic. I know they signed Taylor Hall, but that's a team that I still think has taken a step back. And at 15-1, I think I'm just off the Bruins train.
Yeah, like I kind of would look at it that way. Like I think kind of like everything funny how everything we were saying about the Atlantic Division, how strong it is, and then the Metro being kind of weak. It's like if someone said to you, you can take the Bruins at 15-1 or Pittsburgh or Washington at 25-1. I'm like, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I go Pittsburgh or Washington at the 25-1.
Oh, 100%.
And again, like value again, right? What do you think about the Seattle Kraken at 35-1?
Man,
Why not?
That's
Why
really
not?
interesting because I know a lot of people are going to have the Vegas Golden Knights at the back of their head, knowing what they did in their inaugural season, getting to the Stanley Cup final. But man, when you look at that Pacific Division, and we talked about it when we were going over the Vegas Golden Knights, like it's just not very good. So you could easily, like, no one should be surprised if Seattle makes the playoffs this season.
No, not at all.
Not at all. And all it's going to take is for them to win a playoff series, and that team gets into the second round. And who the hell knows, man? Because they don't have like any like star, like elite level players on their roster. But man, you look at that roster, it's pretty solid, man. So looking at them at 35-1, like it's not bad. It's not bad. I'm not going to put my money on them, but it's not bad.
They'd ride the wave too. Like the crowd would be crazy. The city would be buzzing. It'd be that thing like you've lost before you even stepped on the ice if you're playing in Seattle. Was it last time? Am I not mistaken? Was Vegas not like something crazy, like 400-1 or something their inaugural year? And like, that was the big story.
Yeah, it was absurd. I don't remember the exact number, but they were definitely like over 100, if not 200-1.
It was in the hundreds to much. I think I remember, and maybe I'm getting this way up. I remember seeing a guy in Vegas put like opening day, put down $50. And I think he would have won like 40 grand, which would be 800-1. And maybe one casino somewhere gave him those kind of odds because it was a new team, 400-1. But yeah, it was crazy. I remember too, getting into the story. So whatever the amount was, like the guy was going to win like tens of thousands of dollars. So Vegas was in the final against Washington, and he could have hedged his bet. And he could have put like say like 20 grand on the Capitals to say even money or whatever it was. And they asked him, and he said no. He's like, I rode it. Yeah, I rode this wave the whole time. He's like, let's do it. He's like, so
at that point, you got to hedge your bet.
Yeah, when you're talking that kind of money, I think you got to. I definitely think you got to.
But yeah, the books are learning their lesson because Seattle at 35-1, like you just go down the list, there is a good 12, 13 teams that have worse odds than them to win the Stanley Cup.
I read something too somewhere. So like obviously the odds they give you are like based on math, like higher than what they should be, because I mean Vegas has got to win money. And we're reading somewhere like it wasn't always necessarily like that, especially with like the lower teams. And it was like the 70s in baseball or something, and they had a team at like in the thousands, like some horrible team like in the thousands, and people dabbled a few dollars at it. They threw $5 at it, $10 at it, $1 at it. And the team ended up being in the pennant race. And I don't remember the exact team it was and what year it was, but it kind of sent alarm bells through Vegas. Like, no, we can't have these happen because it's going to bankrupt us if 1 year, one team just does it. Right. So.
Yeah. And it's the same thing with Leicester City in the Premier League.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Where I can't remember what they were, but it was like insane odds to win the Premier League that season. And yeah, I think a lot of these books have learned their lessons, not to like get too crazy with how they're pricing some of these teams that no one really expects never mind win the Stanley Cup, to even make the playoffs.
Yeah, there was the Euro Cup too when Greece won. I think it was like 400 to 1 for them to make the final. It was like 400 to 1 for them, 400 to 1 for them to make the final, 800 to 1 for them to win. And they won.
Goodness.
A tournament like that, it'd be like, say, this last Euro Cup, like not the Greece's equivalent to, like, say, Macedonia or like one of those countries picking them to win the whole thing. Like, yeah, you're gonna get crazy odds. Like these teams sometimes go to these tournaments and don't score a goal, like let alone like win the entire tournament. And Greece did it. Is there any team like in the bottom half that jumps out to you as a nice bet?
Just looking at the betting board here,
like kind of like you could see something happening. Like and again, we're talking about winning the Stanley Cup, but it's about value, right?
Another team.
What was Chicago? What was Chicago 40 to 1, like with those additions, or is that just like,
I don't know, man. The thing with Chicago, I don't think they're very good still, and I'm so sick of people getting on this train. Like I saw a tweet out there where I don't know who he writes for, but he sent out a tweet saying that I think he writes for Post Media. And he sent out a tweet. I'll name drop him, actually. Michael Traco sent out this tweet where he was saying that the Blackhawks should be in the same league as Tampa and Vegas and Colorado. He mentioned Tampa and one other team. It was either Vegas or Colorado. But he's like, the Blackhawks, with all these additions now, are right in the Stanley Cup conversation with these teams.
He wanted clicks.
Like, are you kidding me? Seth Jones, first of all, completely overpaid. I think that contract is egregious. As good of a player as he is, egregious contract. That team, you look at that blue line still, it's still not very good. Marc-Andre Fleury, who we've talked about, Michael Lepore is the number one. I don't want to call you the number one Marc-Andre Fleury hater, but man, oh man.
But things happen to that guy. That's why I'm like, why not Chicago? Why watch Fleury's going to like bring them to the Stanley Cup final or something just to like stick it to me, But yeah, man. Like
that team, I just look at that team on paper still, and I know they're probably going to get Jonathan Taves back, who missed all of last season, but I'm not touching that team. I don't think they're ready to win a Stanley Cup. I know they're 40 to 1, and that's pretty juicy, but in that same range, the Blues and the Jets at 40 to 1. That's sort of intriguing. And I know the Blues did not have a good season last year, but when you look at that team, I'm just looking at them on paper, like, it's still a pretty decent team. Like you still got.
That's how I feel about the Flames. Like you look at the lineup and you're like, yeah, it's a nice lineup. Like you're getting 50 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
Like again, like the whole thing is kind of hard right now to envision the Calgary Flames winning the Stanley Cup, but 50 times your money is pretty freaking good for something like for something crazy to happen.
Yeah, I think that's probably like the lowest I'd go. Lepore,
the line
is probably like that 50 to 1 range, because then looking at some of these other teams like Nashville and New Jersey and the Kings, all in the 60 to 1 range. Same with the Canucks. And then you're getting into all the long shots. But yeah, I think where I draw the line, honestly, I think you nailed it. Like right at Calgary, probably at 50 to 1 is where I draw the line and be like, okay, I don't want to light. I'm down for lighting some money on fire, but I don't want to light this much money on fire.
I didn't tell you how much to put down, Bruno. I just said you should lay the bet.
That's fair. I mean, hey, you could put $5 on one of these teams that's,
exactly.
These teams that are 100, 125 to 1. Why the hell?
Yeah,
not?
I remember one guy I knew what he would do with like hockey betting is he would just pick something absolutely bananas every night and put like $5 on it. Like he'd bet Ovechkin's going to score 5 goals. And he put $5. He'd get like why not? You get like 1,000 to 1 or something like on that happening, and whatever 500 to 1. So and that one time you hit it, you got a story to tell, right?
Exactly. Lepore, one other team I want to talk about real quick, and they have the second best odds of all the Canadian teams to win the Stanley Cup. That's the Edmonton Oilers.
I noticed that Vegas likes Edmonton,
who I think have had an absolute shit show of an offseason. And I am so fired up about this team in a bad way, because it drives me nuts, Lepore. We've talked about Edmonton so many times on this podcast. This team should be so much better than it is. The best player in the world in his prime is on this roster. Leon Draisaitl, Hart Trophy winner, on this roster. And this team, like, to get swept in the first round last season by the Winnipeg Jets, who were without Nikolai Ehlers for half of that series. Like, it's just embarrassing. This team drives me nuts. And to see what they did this offseason, can we just quickly go over this real quick, Lepore? So Oilers fans kept telling me all offseason, and not even in the offseason, even going back to, the regular season and even during the playoffs, about all the cap space that they had heading into the offseason and how many changes they were going to make, and they were going to get so much better. You know what the Edmonton Oilers have done this offseason, Lepore? First, they signed Ryan Nugent-Hopkins to an 8-year, $41 million contract, which is fine. Making a shade over $5 million a year. That's totally fine. Then they traded Caleb Jones and a conditional third-round pick for a 38-year-old washed up. Yes, I called him washed up Duncan Keith.
Wow, Bruno.
Who still has 2 years and over $5.5 million left on his contract. So they ate the entire Duncan Keith cap hit. They didn't even get Chicago to take any of that money on themselves in terms of the actual.
And they gave up a young player.
And they gave up a young player and a draft pick. Just egregious. Then they lost Adam Larson to the Seattle Kraken, who signed a 4-year, $16 million contract with them. And
he's going to have a great season, by the way. Watch.
I think he is too.
He's going to be happy. He's going to be happy. He's going to have a great season. Watch out for. I'm intrigued to see what Larson's over/under numbers are going to be for the futures. But keep going on your rant, Bruno.
Yeah, no. I agree about Larson, because there was rumblings that he just wasn't himself in Edmonton, and going back to the whole Larson for Hall swap. And
exactly.
And it just didn't. And even though he was solid last year specifically, he just wasn't. It seemed like he just wasn't himself, just based on some of the reports that we've seen out there. But yeah, to continue this rant. And then everyone, talking about how they're going to upgrade their goaltending, and that, that's been one of their main areas of weakness. Lepore, they're running it back with the same tandem. They re-signed 39-year-old Mike Smith, and I get it. He had a great season last year, a little resurgence. I believe he put up a .923 save percentage. But are you actually going to bet on Mike Smith at 39 years old to have a similar season as he had last year, and he only played 30-something games? You're really relying on that? And then Mikko Koskinen, you're running it back with Mikko Koskinen? So you're running it back with the same goaltending tandem? This is what Ken Holland's doing out here. And then Lepore, it gets even better. It gets even better.
The rumors are trying to get rid of Koskinen.
With all that cap space, Lepore, Ken Holland, the great Ken Holland, who inherited 7 Hall of Famers when he took over as GM of the Red Wings. 7 Hall of Famers Bruno's he inherited. Deep. This great executive,
7, that's the number,
who we love to call one of the best sports executives in North America, who I believe actually won an award at one point as one of the greatest sports executives in North American sports. He committed $65 million to Zach Hyman, Tyson Barrie, and Cody fucking Ceci. $65 million. And then Lepore, it didn't end there. You know what he did after that? Darnell Nurse. I love Darnell Nurse. Great player. Had a career season last year. Scored a ton of goals. But then he gave Darnell Nurse an 8-year, $74 million extension. Darnell Nurse is making $9.25 million a year starting the year after next.
Yeah.
Lepore, man, you got to help me make sense of this, because this team is essentially running it back with the same roster. They've added Zach Hyman, which is sure that's an upgrade, but you're running it back with the same goaltending. Their defense core, I think we can all agree, has gotten worse. So what the hell is this team doing, Lepore?
You have a pressure on me to try to explain to Bruno.
I'm at a loss for words with this fucking team.
I'm with you. I don't. So wait, just to be clear though, Bruno, you won't be betting on the Oilers at 22-1 to win the Stanley Cup. No, just to confirm. You
know what? It's funny because it's the Connor McDavid factor. That's almost even going back to Pittsburgh and Washington. It's why not just throw some money on Connor McDavid carrying this franchise on his back, which he's been doing his whole career. But no, I'm staying away from the Oilers at 22.
The division is shit too, again, like we said. So that's
a
come out. It wouldn't be that shot, and I'm sure that helps their math. But yeah, no, the Oilers, I don't know. I wouldn't touch that one. But and even with them, the one thing that jumped out to me is in and out, right? Larson, solid season last year, out. and then CC in. It's like weird. And then the whole thing too with Keith. I'm going to watch a lot of the Oilers this year, like with the intention of keeping my eye on Keith. Like, I mean, the guy's got a lot of pride. Everyone loves Duncan Keith. He's like a total gym rat. I listened to this thing once about how hard he works in the offseason, like what his days like. Like, it makes no sense how active this guy is. So he's got pride that way. Like, I expect him to be okay. And I'm kind of rooting for him. But that's one of those ones. It's gonna take a while for me. And this is like the geek thing. It's gonna take a while for me to get used to him in an Oilers jersey.
That's gonna be bizarre.
Like that. That's weird, man. Like Duncan, like future Hall of Famer, Conn Smythe winner with the Blackhawks. Just you don't really picture him in that jersey. He's even an Oilers jersey. But I think that division altogether is going to be fun, man. Like there's like good luck trying to pick the top 4 teams in that division in order. Like you have an expansion team. You have Edmonton, who we just talked about. You have a Calgary team that underachieved last year. You had a Vancouver team that went through COVID and Pettersson being hurt last year and all these other question marks. It's good. The California teams, I mean, like, as I said before, like, some people think LA is sneaky good. San Jose's got star power. Like, I'm not going to say I expect anything from them, but like, I mean, they're never an easy team to play against. I wouldn't call them that because of the star power they have. So really, I mean, it's a weird division all around. So like maybe from a betting perspective on who's going to win the division, we'll see the odds on that one, because you might get some good ones on a team that actually does have a chance.
Yeah, no, you nailed it with that Pacific division. Like besides Vegas, who I think we can pretty much all agree on is going to win that division. Like, yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I'm just saying more playoff wise, like a fluke thing 100%.
Happens.
A team can come out, beat Vegas or something.
Lepore, I think after Vegas, it's a total crapshoot. Like, sure, right off the Ducks, who they suck and they're rebuilding and figuring things out. LA, like you said, is getting better. San Jose still has some legit star talent on that roster. Then you look at all those Canadian teams in Seattle, it really is a crapshoot. Like I could see after Vegas, like any two of those teams getting the second and third spot for a guaranteed playoff spot. I mean, obviously there's the wild card as well, but I think, in terms of the top 3 in that division after Vegas, like it's really anyone's guess at this point who's going to fill that 2 and 3 spot.
If it was right now, like, would we bet the Oilers
to make the playoffs?
To come 2.
Oh, to come 2. Oh man, that's
I think I would. I think I would, to be honest.
I probably would as well, just because they have the best player in the league. Yeah. And I think over the course of the regular season, I mean, obviously we've now realized, following the Toronto Maple Leafs for the last number of years, that the regular season and playoffs are 2 totally different things. I think over the course of the regular season, Connor McDavid putting up over 100 points again, they should be able to finish as the 2 seed in that division.
Yeah, like I don't see them falling all the way down to like a wild card battle or anything, like barring injuries or anything like that. So
yeah, no, for sure.
Always fun. The Edmonton Oilers are always fun.
Oh, I love it. And I can't wait, Lepore. You think that's the only rant I'm going to have on the Edmonton Oilers? Like, man, I feel like there's going to be some moments this season that are just going to fire me up. And I
don't know what would be worse for you, the Oilers winning the cup or the Canadians winning the cup.
Oh man, Lepore. That's
who would it be for me? For me, it'd be Fleury Cup.
Marc-Andre Fleury, Stanley Cup, or just Chicago in the Cup final. Yeah. Oh, that would be just
Chicago. Yeah,
podcast
Chicago,
ratings
Montreal, Stanley Cup final. We got to shut it down.
Just losing his mind. But yeah, man. I mean, that's pretty much it when it comes to the Stanley Cup odds. Like we said, like I don't think we're going anything lower than the 50-1 range. Looking at the board. But Lepore, another conversation I want to have is specifically with the Atlantic Division. Mm-hmm. And we've touched on this, a little bit with the Leafs and how we think they're going to perform this season. But as it stands right now, do you think the Leafs are for sure going to finish as a top 3 seed in the Atlantic Division? And I'll even ask you, like, where do you think, like, right now, at this moment, as the roster is currently constructed, where do you think this team is going to finish in the Atlantic Division?
I think, to be honest, I mean, everyone's going to write in Tampa in first place. But I think the next three teams everyone would circle are Toronto, Boston, and Florida. But I think if any fan really pushed that team as like a guarantee to finish in the top three, I think that wouldn't be very smart, simply because, I mean, there's three of them with only two spots and all three are really good teams. Would I bet on the Leafs finishing like in the top three? Yeah, like I think I would. Like the division, there's a lot of X factors in this division this year. Like you mentioned, like the changes to Boston, like Krejci's a big change, man. I'm not necessarily going to say like a loss because, as you touched on as well, like they're filling in Taylor Hall, but it's a culture difference. Like there's also thing like Kate Bergeron and Marchand like are getting older. Marchand weird, like his pace of like how he's improved at his age is actually pretty historic.
Yeah, it's insane.
Well, yeah, like not too many guys in NHL history have like improved or had their best ever seasons or among their best seasons like into their 30s like he has. So props to him. But there's that weird thing, kind of like you're kind of like done with Boston. Like I still think Boston's a really good team and I don't want to play them in the playoffs. And there's that whole factor. But I think the whole thing of them being like a legit Stanley Cup contender has kind of faded. And maybe in a few months will look ridiculous when they're just being the Bruins again. As for Florida, like I expect a lot out of Florida this year, man. Like I think Florida is one of those teams in the NHL that like people have a hard time taking them seriously because we have like old narratives about the Florida Panthers like stuck in our minds about how they're a joke of an organization and no one goes to their games. They never spend money, but I mean, they got a good coach, they got good players. Hopefully if the goaltending can keep going, man, like that's another team that can do really well. But to write in to at this point to fully write in Boston, Toronto, or Florida into the top three is kind of tough because I think they're all kind of in that same boat. The way there's a lot of unknowns. But as far as the Leafs specifically go, like I'll say it, like if I had to make my standings right now, like I would put the Leafs second, and like everyone throws shit at me after that comment. But like I said earlier, kind of like the Edmonton factor where they have McDavid over 82 games, while the Toronto Maple Leafs have the Maurice Rocket Richard winner in Matthews and our first team All-Star in Mitch Marner. That's a lot of points. That's a lot of points from two guys that they're pretty much a lock to get barring injury. And then you throw in the pretty well locked points as well from Tavares and Nylander, and they're going to score goals. Like they're going to score goals. So like you can bet on that. So at this point, here more shit just getting thrown at me. Like I'll put the Leafs at number 2 in that division.
No, like Lepore, I'm right there with you, man, because as much shit as people like to throw on the Leafs for being god awful in the playoffs and choking every season, they're a great regular season team.
Oh yeah.
Let's just say it. This team is an elite regular season team.
Elite.
Which is sad. It's sad to say, considering what this team has done in the Matthews era specifically, falling short in the playoffs, but they're a very good regular season team. And I do also think that as currently constructed, I'm going to say, honestly, I think this team is a lock to finish in the top 3. I really do.
A lock.
I do. And I think Boston is going to take a step back. I think the loss of Krejci is really big. Like now their number 2 center is going to be Charlie Coyle. Like, so you're going from a Bergeron Krejci 1-2 punch at center to Bergeron and Charlie Coyle. So I think that's going to be an issue for Boston. And I know that they re-signed Taylor Hall, and he was great when he came over at the trade deadline. And Pasternak, hopefully for them is going to have is going to be healthy the entire season. I know last year he missed, I believe it was like the first, 25 games or something like that. Because he was dealing with an offseason injury. So yeah, I mean, you get a full season of Pasternak, who, as we all know, is one of the best goal scorers in the league, but I don't know. I it's like I said, I don't really view this team as a legit Stanley Cup contender. And I look at their blue line as well. Like Charlie McAvoy is great, but then after that, Matt Grzelcyk, Derek Forbort, Brandon Carlo, Mike Riley, Connor Clifton. Like when I just go through the names on that blue line, to me, question
marks.
Yeah, a lot of question marks. I think they're lacking a little bit of talent up front, despite having the star power that they do. So again, like the Bruins, I think they're still a really solid team. Like I still think they're probably going to make the playoffs, but honestly, I think over the course of 82 games, just looking at the rosters, I think the Leafs are probably going to have a better regular season than Boston. And, I guess we can pencil in Tampa in the one spot, almost out of respect at this point. This team is back-to-back Cup champions. But, even looking at that team, Lepore, they lost Barclay Gaudreau and Blake Coleman. And that was a massive part of their bottom six. They also lost Tyler Johnson.
Another one.
Like this team has lost some players. They lost Yanni Gord in the expansion draft to the Seattle Kraken. This team has lost some talent. Like, don't think that they're just going to come back guns a-blazing and are going to blow away the Atlantic Division. So, but again, saying all that, we'll pencil them into the one spot because of everything they've accomplished the last couple seasons. And then after that, it's like you said, I think Florida is that one X factor team because I look at that team on paper and up front, that is a scary team, man.
It's a good team.
That's a very scary team. And you can argue that Florida, like even looking at their defense core, like it's not that great. Like even just looking at some of the names they had, like Aaron Ekblad, Mackenzie Weegar, Brandon Montour, Gustav Forsling, Radko Gudas, like that defense core isn't really, scaring me, but they do have a great forward core. And then you look at their goaltending with Spencer Knight, who at some point I think is just going to take over this job from Sergei Bobrovsky, who Florida probably wants to. Yeah. I mean, you want to talk about lighting money on fire. They want to light that contract on fire. Like that is just a nightmare. But yeah,
horrible. Imagine Florida, how scary they'd be as an organization if they didn't have that right now.
Oh my God,
man.
Can you imagine them with adding I don't even want to say adding a $10 million forward, but if they added a $6 and a $4 million forward up front.
Yeah. Or a bit, if they could have went out and got Hamilton.
Yeah. Or a defenseman. Exactly.
Yeah. If they could have done that, what?
Just give that $9 million that the Devils gave to Hamilton. You replace that with a Bobrovsky contract. Yeah. That team looks insane right now.
So, yeah. You're pretty optimistic about Florida then. So, so you'd have it Tampa, Toronto, Florida.
Yeah. I think, yes, you know what? I'm going to go and say it. I think that Florida right now, I have them a little bit ahead of Boston, and maybe that's kind of crazy, but man, Barkov right now he's legit one of the best players in the NHL.
Yeah.
Just as
it's kind of like what I said before with that whole Florida thing, where it's like, you don't give them enough attention. Like Barkov doesn't get enough attention because he plays for the Florida Panthers.
Exactly. And Jonathan Huberdeau, who, both of those guys used to be underrated, but now that everyone's calling them underrated, it's almost like they've become overrated in a way. But Sam Bennett, who emerged as an unreal number 2 center for them last season at the deadline. And then they traded for Sam Reinhart. Like this team up front, they're going to score a ton of goals. They're going to be one of the best offenses in the league. And I think, right now, I think I'd have them a little bit ahead of Boston, but I think all 4 are probably going to make the playoffs, Lepore.
Yeah.
One of those teams is probably going to get a wild card spot. So that's the way
and even with this order, even with putting them in order again, you don't know what's going to happen with injuries or additions and this and that. So, just based on how it goes right now, I think I would put them in the same order as you, but I'd also put them all in the playoffs. So I can't see Boston missing the playoffs. But I can't picture that one.
And we can all agree, Montreal, they're not making the playoffs, right?
There you go. Bam. Bruno just finishes the podcast with that. This season's going to be fun for Montreal, man. We can go on a rant about this one, but I'd like to ask, again, conversations, comment down below, everyone. Montreal Canadiens fans, what are the expectations this year? I wouldn't know what answer to give that. It's kind of tough to be negative after a team makes the Stanley Cup final. But at the same time, you look at those teams in your division and you look at your past 5 regular seasons, and it's kind of tough to be optimistic at the same time. So again, another fun one. It's going to be fun to talk about Montreal.
Yeah, that's a team that's going to be very interesting to track. Obviously, with the Shea Weber injury, they brought in Mike Hoffman, which was a nice signing.
That'll be fun. Yeah.
And then Carey Price, who's also dealing with injuries, but it looks like he's going to be fine for the start of the season. But yeah, that's a team heading in. I don't know, man. I'd have them outside of the playoff picture. I think at best they're fighting for a wild card spot, but it's going to be very interesting to see how this Atlantic division shakes out this season, because I think there's going to be a couple of surprises, and I think we might not even see Tampa win the division this year. So that's going to be,
there you go.
It's going to be very fun to track, Lepore. But Any final thoughts, man, before we wrap up this show?
No, I mean, I enjoyed it though, man. I enjoyed talking about the future. It's like we got to find that. I'm sure they'll come out as we get closer to the season of like the points over unders, because those ones are really fun because you can talk about any team and just what you think. And those ones are good because to some people seem like crazy high or crazy low. So people get excited and passionate about it. But I enjoyed having this talk, man. It's fun to talk about the betting, and hopefully next time people tune in. There's a big Bodog logo above our podcast.
We're waiting,
so
Bodog.
looking forward to it.
We're waiting patiently.
Caesar's Palace, Bet365. Why doesn't how about this, Bruno? Let's move the show to the lobby of the Win in Vegas.
There we go. You just figured it out.
Yeah, we'll talk hockey betting and run a pod from there. Just give us a couple sweets and we're good, man.
Love it, man.
plus.
Let's set that as a goal, Lepore. That should be our goal.
Yeah, just like the Leafs, realistic expectations, right?
Yeah. We want to move the show to Vegas, and the Leafs want to win a playoff series. Can we
exactly? What's more unlikely, everyone? Again, comment down below.
Yeah, comment down below for real. Us moving the podcast full time to Vegas, or the Leafs winning a playoff series this year?
Yeah.
Let us know down below. But no, you said it, man. It was a lot of fun talking betting odds, and we're going to get into more hockey betting leading up to the season. And I know it's kind of dead right now in terms of news and stuff like that. But it's like I said on the top, off the top of the show, rather, that, who knows? Maybe there's going to be a Jack Eichel trade at some point, and that's going to shake up the landscape of the NHL and who we view as the, true Stanley Cup contenders. But it was a fun episode. Yeah. We're going to get into more hockey betting, like I said, not only leading up to the season, but next season as well. We're going to try to make it a bigger part of the show because I think it's a lot of fun just to spitball back and forth like this, Lepore.
It's awesome.
All right, man. That is going to do it for episode 31 of the Gluttons for Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. Once again, if you're a new listener and you enjoyed the show, it would be a big time help if you give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple. And if you're watching us on YouTube and you enjoyed the podcast today, it would be a big time help if you smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you know exactly when the GFP podcast is posting some new content. All right, everybody, that's going to do it. For Michael Lepore, I'm Anthony Bruno, and we will see you in the next one.
Thanks, everyone.